Hello and welcome to this session on literary terms. I'll begin today's discourse with a popular poetic form, dramatic monologue, perfected by Victorian poet Robert Browning. Dramatic monologue, as the very name suggests, is a speech by a single person which is dramatic in nature. It's a poem in the form of a speech, or you can call it a narrative, by a person who describes a particular situation or series of events, and in the process of describing that event, he reveals aspects of his own character. He gives us vital clues to his own psyche, his own personality, unwittingly or unintentionally. This poetry is dramatic in the sense that it has a theatrical quality to it, that is, the poem is meant to be read to an audience. When we say a poem is a monologue, it actually means the poem is in the form of a speech or a narration by a single speaker, with no dialogue coming from any other characters. Just imagine a person standing alone on a stage speaking to an audience. Certainly the audience is implied in this kind of poetry. The poet speaks through the medium of an imagined character, which makes this poetry sound objective. And mind you, the opinions stated by the character are not to be taken as the views of the poet himself. Most of the time, the speaker is trying to convince someone of something and may or may not be telling the whole truth. Sometimes what the speaker doesn't say becomes much more important than what he says, and that's much more revealing and interesting at the same time. My Last Touches by Robert Browning is probably one of the best examples of dramatic monologue, because Browning is considered the master of this type of poetry. If not the first to inaugurate it, but to perfect this poetic form, credit goes to him. Dramatic monologue offers psychoanalysis of the protagonist in the poem. I want you to differentiate between dramatic monologue and another popular theatrical literary device, soliloquy. Soliloquy is one person speaking for an extended duration while alone or while other characters cannot hear him. In contrast to a monologue, when multiple characters can be on stage, a soliloquy is usually delivered by a character standing alone on a stage. Soliloquy is one character speaking his thoughts aloud. Typically, the audience understands that the speech is a theatrical device for making a character's thoughts known and not words actually spoken out loud by that character. Soliloquy and monologues are both extended speeches by one person. The difference lies in to whom these people are talking. If they are addressing other characters, it's typically considered a monologue. If they're talking to themselves, it is called soliloquy, and this is the key difference which I want you to remember. So we can say that in dramatic monologue, a single person delivers a speech on one aspect of his life. The audience may or may not be present, and the speaker reveals his temperament and character only through his speech. And the thoughts of the speaker are not meant to be confused with the thoughts of the poet. In fact, the views of the speaker may contradict with those of the poet. The speech of his character makes up the whole of the verse in a specific situation at a crucial moment. Usually the subject of the monologue is self-revelation, and the rhyme scheme is not important in dramatic monologue, but it's typically in the lyric form. Well, these are some of the characteristic features of dramatic monologue. I hope the poetic form is clear to you. I would advise you to explore the dramatic monologues composed by Robert Browning, especially in the lines of My Last Touches, Last Ride Together, Porphyria's Lover, and Sato, and Rabbi Ben Ezra. These are quite popular of his dramatic monologues, which are quite rich in philosophical content, and they assert his mastery of the form. I personally find Browning quite interesting, and his poetry offers a kind of psychoanalysis which is quite interesting for the reader, quite rich when it comes to linguistic properties. And Browning is the most researched poet of the Victorian era, along with Tennyson, who too has written quite popular dramatic lyrics, like Ulysses is quite famous one by Tennyson. And if you find time, please explore these two poets, Robert Browning and Tennyson. They are quite important for you and luckily interesting too. You would enjoy reading them. Please read. And as a student of literature, you are supposed to explore Browning in your later phase. So it's better that you started doing it now. In our next segment, we'll discuss few more literary terms. That's all for now. Thank you so much for your patient listening.